I never thought a simple decision to rent a cabin in the woods would turn into the worst mistake of my life. It all began when I needed a break, some peace, away from the noise of the city and the endless distractions. I found this tiny cabin online, advertised as a perfect escape for anyone looking to disconnect and recharge. The photos looked inviting: rustic wood walls, a cozy fireplace, surrounded by dense forest. It felt like exactly what I needed. But the moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on right away. The air was heavier than it should have been, and the silence wasn't peaceful, it was suffocating. As I unpacked my things, I told myself it was just nerves, that maybe the unfamiliar surroundings were playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The first night was when things started to go wrong. Just as I was settling in, I heard it, a soft tapping at the window. At first, I thought it was just a branch brushing against the glass. But then the tapping turned into a deliberate, rhythmic knocking, like someone was trying to get my attention. I froze. My heart raced as I stared at the window, but no one was there. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. But then came the whispering. Faint, almost inaudible voices, coming from the woods just beyond the cabin. They weren't words I could understand, more like fragmented sounds carried by the wind. I pressed my ear against the cold wall, trying to catch more, but the moment I focused, the whispers stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. I should have left right then and there. But I didn't. Something held me back: curiosity, stubbornness, or maybe something else I can't explain. What I do know is that from that moment, the cabin stopped being a refuge and became a trap. This story isn't just about a creepy night in the woods. It's about the kind of fear that doesn't just scare you, it burrows under your skin and refuses to let go. So if you're ready, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened during those terrifying days. The things I saw, the sounds I heard, and the mistakes I made. And trust me, it all started with that first knock at the window. The drive to the cabin took longer than I expected. The GPS lost signal halfway through the dense forest, and I found myself relying on the winding dirt road and the fading light of the late afternoon. Every mile I drove, the trees grew thicker, their twisted branches clawing at the sky. The quiet was unlike anything I'd experienced in the city: no cars, no voices, just the occasional rustle of leaves. When I finally spotted the cabin, it looked exactly like the photos: weathered wood, a small porch with a creaky swing, and tall pine trees surrounding it on all sides. The smell of damp earth and pine needles filled the air. I parked my car and stepped out, the crunch of gravel under my boots breaking the silence. The air was crisp and cool, but I noticed a strange chill running down my spine, one that didn't seem related to the weather. Inside, the cabin was small but cozy. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I explored. There was a little kitchen, a fireplace with a stack of firewood beside it, and a loft bed upstairs. Everything smelled faintly of old wood and something else I couldn't identify, like the remnants of a fire long gone cold. I unpacked my bags, trying to settle in, but something kept pulling my attention to the windows. Outside, the forest seemed to press against the cabin like it was alive, watching. I tried to shake the feeling, telling myself I was just imagining things. After all, it was supposed to be a peaceful retreat. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest transformed. Shadows stretched and danced across the walls of the cabin, and the silence deepened. I built a small fire in the fireplace, the crackling flames casting flickering light across the room. The warmth was comforting, but it couldn't chase away the unease creeping over me. Then, the noises started. At first, it was subtle, soft creaks from the wooden frame of the cabin, maybe a branch tapping against the roof. I told myself it was normal. Old cabins make noises, especially when the temperature drops at night. But then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate steps just outside the cabin. I froze, straining to listen. The footsteps circled the cabin, slow and heavy, pausing now and then. I grabbed my phone, but no signal. The sound of footsteps stopped suddenly, leaving the night deathly silent again. My heart was pounding. I debated whether to open the door or just wait it out, but something made me stay inside. I locked every door and window, pulled the curtains tight, and sat as close to the fire as I could without burning myself. Just when I thought the worst was over, a faint whisper reached my ears. At first, it was barely audible, like someone muttering right on the edge of hearing. I held my breath, listening hard. The whispering grew slightly louder, a strange language or maybe just nonsense sounds carried by the wind. It felt like the voices were calling to me, pulling me toward the dark woods outside. I wanted to run, but I was trapped in a strange mix of fear and fascination. I couldn't look away from the window, even though every instinct told me to. The night stretched on, each minute heavier with dread. Around 2 a.m., I heard the tapping again. This time it wasn't at the window, but from the back door. Tap, 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 slow and steady. I couldn't take it anymore. I whispered into the darkness, "Who's there?" No answer, just silence. That's when I saw it, a shadow moving just beyond the tree line. It was too dark to make out details, but it was definitely there. Watching. I forced myself away from the window and tried to distract my mind. I turned on some soft music, anything to drown out the sounds outside. But it didn't help. The silence was broken only by the occasional creak, the tapping, and those whispers that seemed to come closer with every minute. By the time I finally fell asleep, I was exhausted, but every time I stirred, I thought I saw movement outside the windows. The woods felt alive, like something was lurking just out of sight, waiting. I promised myself that tomorrow, I would explore the area in daylight and figure out what was going on. Maybe it was just wildlife, or someone playing a prank. I needed answers, but what I didn't know was that the answers were far darker than I ever imagined. Morning came, but the sunlight did little to ease the heavy weight hanging over me. The forest outside looked calm, almost inviting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed overnight. The air still felt thick, like it was holding its breath. I decided to explore the cabin's immediate surroundings. The dirt path leading away from the porch was narrow and lined with thick bushes and twisted roots. As I stepped outside, the smell of wet earth was stronger, almost pungent. It clung to my clothes, like the woods themselves wanted to mark me. Not far from the cabin, I noticed something strange, a circle of broken branches and flattened grass. At first, I thought it might be an animal's nest or some sign of wildlife. But the way the branches were snapped cleanly, almost deliberately, made me pause. It didn't look natural. It looked like it had been made by human hands, or something else. As I walked closer, I spotted faint markings carved into the bark of a nearby tree. They were simple, jagged lines that didn't form any letters or numbers I recognized. Still, they gave me chills. Like warnings. I snapped a quick photo with my phone, though the signal was still non-existent. The more I moved through the woods, the more signs I found, scratches on trees, footprints that seemed too big and too deep to be from any animal I knew, and strange symbols scrawled on stones near a shallow stream. Each discovery felt like pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve. Back at the cabin, the silence had thickened. The kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every little sound. I tried to relax with a book, but every creak and rustle put me on edge. Then the noises began again. This time, it wasn't just footsteps or tapping. I heard whispering voices, closer, clearer. Not just outside the cabin, but inside it too. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But the whispers seemed to come from the walls themselves, low murmurs that rose and fell like waves. One time, I caught a phrase, something like, "leave," or "go." I don't know if my mind was playing tricks on me, but the message felt urgent, desperate. The temperature in the cabin dropped suddenly. I wrapped myself in a blanket, trying to convince myself it was just a cold draft, but the chill didn't go away. I lit a candle, hoping the small flame would chase away the creeping darkness, but the shadows on the walls seemed to dance unnaturally. That night, the tapping came back with a vengeance. Not just at the windows or doors, this time, the sound came from inside the cabin. The floorboards creaked as if something was pacing, slow and deliberate, right beneath my feet. I checked the basement hatch. It was locked tight, but I could hear faint noises from below. Thumps, scratching, like claws against wood. I tried calling for help, dialing friends and even 911, but there was no signal. I was completely cut off. The whispers grew louder, almost chanting now, a haunting rhythm that echoed through the empty rooms. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to sleep. Around 3 a.m., I saw it again, the shadow outside, moving closer this time. It was just beyond the porch light's weak glow, shifting in the dark like a living nightmare. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The shadow stopped at the edge of the light, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw eyes, cold, empty, watching me. Then it vanished into the forest. I sat frozen, clutching a knife I found in the kitchen drawer, realizing how unprepared I was for whatever was happening. The cabin wasn't just a place to stay. It was a trap, a prison, and whatever haunted these woods was patient and relentless. That night stretched on like an endless nightmare, every minute marked by noises and shadows that refused to fade. I knew then that I wasn't alone, and whatever was with me wasn't going anywhere. The nights had become unbearable. Sleep was a distant memory, replaced by a constant, gnawing dread that wrapped itself around me like a second skin. I felt watched, hunted. Every shadow seemed to hide something sinister, every creak a signal of approaching danger. I knew I was teetering on the edge of fear and madness, but I had no choice but to face whatever this was, because the cabin wasn't going to let me leave. It was the third night when it happened, the moment that shattered whatever fragile sense of safety I'd tried to cling to. I was sitting near the fireplace, the flickering flames casting long, jittery shadows on the walls, trying to steady my shaking hands. The whispers had started again, soft at first, then building into a haunting chant that filled the room. Suddenly, the temperature plunged. My breath came out in frosty puffs, and the fire flickered violently, struggling to stay alive. The room went dark, save for the weak glow from the dying embers. Then, from the corner of the room, I saw it. A figure. Tall, thin, and impossibly still. Its shape was vague, like smoke twisted into human form, but I could see two glowing eyes cutting through the darkness, eyes that burned with a cold, unnatural light. The air around it felt heavy, suffocating. I wanted to scream, but no sound escaped. My body was frozen, every muscle locked in place. The figure didn't move but seemed to pulse with dark energy, filling the cabin with a chilling presence. Then, it spoke. Not with words, but with a voice inside my mind, a voice like distant thunder rolling over a stormy sea. It told me to leave, to never come back, but there was something else, a warning. Something about the forest, the cabin, and what lived there. I tried to respond, but my mouth was dry and numb. The figure's eyes bore into me, making me feel like I was unraveling, piece by piece. Then it was gone, vanishing like smoke in the wind. The room flooded with light again as the fire roared back to life. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, my heart pounding like a drum. For a long time, I just lay there, trying to process what I'd seen. Was it a ghost? A demon? Or something older, something darker that had lived in these woods long before the cabin was built? I knew one thing, I wasn't alone, and whatever it was watching me. The rest of the night was a blur of restless hours and sharp noises. I heard footsteps again, but this time they were inside the cabin, circling me like a predator stalking its prey. In the dim morning light, I checked every corner, every shadow, but found nothing. Yet, the feeling of being watched didn't fade. I tried to leave the cabin that day, but the forest seemed to close in around me. The path I'd walked the day before was gone, swallowed by undergrowth and shadows. Every direction looked the same, twisted trees and thick bushes that blocked my way. I was trapped. And whatever that figure was, it wasn't done with me yet. The day after the encounter, the forest felt like a maze designed to trap me. Every path I tried to follow twisted back on itself or disappeared into thick, unbreakable underbrush. I swear the trees shifted when I wasn't looking, rearranging themselves to block my way. I spent hours wandering, trying to find a road or any sign of civilization. My phone remained useless, no signal, no calls, no messages. It was like I'd been cut off from the world entirely. The isolation wasn't just physical, it was mental, like the woods wanted me to forget there was anything beyond them. As dusk fell, panic settled deep in my chest. I tried to retrace my steps back to the cabin, but the sun dropped fast, and shadows lengthened into something sinister. The forest felt alive, whispering threats I couldn't understand. Back at the cabin, I bolted the door and windows, but the sense of being watched didn't fade. The scratching under the floorboards returned, louder now, like something was trying to break in, or break me. I shouted for help into the empty woods, my voice breaking with desperation, but only the wind answered. That night, the tapping returned, louder and more insistent than ever. It wasn't just at the windows anymore, it came from inside the cabin, behind the walls. I pressed my ear against the wood and could hear breath, shallow and ragged. I wasn't alone. Fear turned to something colder, deeper. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay. I packed a bag with what little I had, ready to make a run at first light. But when morning came, the forest blocked my escape again. A wall of thick fog rolled in overnight, muffling sound and swallowing light. I stepped outside, heart pounding, but the cabin was swallowed in gray. I could barely see past the trees. The fog moved strangely, almost alive, shifting, curling, hiding. And then I heard it, a low growl, coming from somewhere deep in the woods. It wasn't an animal I recognized. It was something else. Something hungry. The growl grew louder, closer. I ran back inside, slamming the door behind me, my chest heaving. I couldn't tell if what followed was real or just my mind unraveling. The cabin felt less like shelter and more like a cage. The last night at the cabin was unlike anything I could have imagined. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to break. I barely slept. Every noise felt amplified, the creaks, the taps, the whispers that now sounded like full sentences, urgent and threatening. I could barely keep my eyes open, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. Something was coming. Around midnight, the cabin plunged into darkness. The fire had died out hours ago, and the power I'd hoped to find somewhere was non-existent. I sat on the floor, clutching the knife I'd brought out of the kitchen, eyes darting around the room. Then, the tapping started again, this time, not at a window or a door, but from above me, on the loft ceiling. Slow, deliberate taps, like someone pacing, waiting. My breath caught as I realized the loft ladder was shaking slightly, as if someone, or something, was climbing down. I stood frozen as a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the same smoky shape from before, but this time clearer, tall, with elongated limbs and glowing eyes that pierced through the darkness. Its presence filled the room, crushing the air around me. It moved closer, gliding across the floor silently, stopping just inches from me. I felt a coldness that wasn't from the temperature, a cold that seeped into my bones. Suddenly, it spoke in my mind again, louder and more urgent. You cannot leave. This place is mine. You belong here now. Panic exploded inside me. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my footing. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound that echoed off the walls. The figure lunged forward, and I swung the knife blindly. The blade passed through the shadow like smoke, powerless against it. It grabbed my wrist with a strength I couldn't fight and pressed a cold, invisible force against my chest. I gasped, feeling my breath leaving me as if I were drowning. The whispers swelled into a roar, filling my mind with visions, twisted trees, faces in the bark, eyes watching from every shadow. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, struggling to break free. The figure's grip loosened, and it vanished in a swirl of dark mist. I lay there, trembling, the weight of the night pressing down on me. I knew I had to get out. But the forest outside wasn't just a place, it was a prison, and the cabin was its heart. As dawn broke, the first light filtering weakly through the trees, I packed my things one last time. The path back was still hidden, the forest refusing to release me. I took one last look at the cabin, its dark windows like eyes staring back, and walked into the woods, knowing I might never escape. I don't know exactly how long I wandered through those woods after leaving the cabin. Time lost meaning, the forest seemed endless, every step heavy with exhaustion and fear. Eventually, I found a road, and by some miracle, a passing car picked me up. I made it out, but the experience never left me. Even now, the memories haunt me. The tapping, the whispers, those glowing eyes, they replay in my mind, especially when the night is quiet and the wind rustles through the trees. I can still feel that cold presence, lurking just beyond sight, waiting. I've never gone back to that cabin, and I never will. Some places are better left alone. The forest claimed something from me that night, something I don't fully understand, but will carry forever. If you're thinking about seeking solitude in the woods, be careful. Not everything out there wants you to find peace. Some things are watching. Some things want you to stay. Thanks for listening to my story. If you want to hear more like this, make sure to subscribe and like the video. It helps me keep sharing these chilling tales.